part 3.
Who gives a damn about me? Huh? Me? What? Me? Yeah, little old me. Myself and I live or die, laugh or cry. I'm all that I
Hey folks, welcome back to part 3 of the video series. In the previous parts, I covered how I got introduced to design, about my first internship, some of the side projects, how my interviews went, and what products I worked in my first job. In this video, I'm going to talk about a very helpful side project, a freelance project, my first freelance project in design, and how I prepared my portfolio for the next round of interviews for my second job after finishing 1 year at my first, how the interviews went and what rounds were involved, and what products I worked on in my second job. So let's jump into 2020. So the first project I'm going to start with is a side project. I called it T5 Open Sourced. It stands for Telugu Film Industry Open Sourced. Before I talk more about what the project is, I'll tell you how it started. Around this time, I was slowly getting curious about the other side of films, which is filmmaking. And I was starting to read whatever I could on cinematography, editing, direction, writing mainly. And I was also breaking down some of my favorite scenes from some movies and putting them onto Figma to understand how do they plan a shot, how many different angles are there, for how long are they staying on a particular screen. I used to have the script beside me to understand how they were converting pure script to visuals. And also there's something about beautiful frames coming together on Figma. I don't know, it just still fascinates me. So while going through this learning process of filmmaking, I faced one problem, which was the availability of important material to learn from, mainly the technicalities. So that's where this idea originated, the T5 open sourced. Now going into the project, I'll show you a landing page design I had, a very simple one. I think I developed this also, but I lost the domain. So this was just the concept I was exploring. This was not a product. This was not anything. I was hypothesizing what if I could find everything about a film's equipment at one place, their cameras, lenses, what drones they used, what sound equipment they used. What if I found all the social profiles of everyone working in that film at one place? Kind of like a LinkedIn for artists. And a podcast was something there in my mind where I actually go and talk to some film technicians and understand their workflows, what tools they used, etc. Which, by the way, materialized 2 years later. I have a podcast on Spotify called Film Decoded. It has only one episode so far, but the second one is coming soon. So this was the rough idea of the project I had. And I went ahead and defined how a movie page would look like if all this information was there. So let's take an example of a movie called Inagran Kaimendi. It's a Telugu movie which released in 2017. So I defined all the possible departments that could be there. I took this from the credits of the film. I went ahead and defined in cinematography what could be valuable for a filmmaking enthusiast. So that was my user in mind. And I tried to display information that could be useful for them. So who's the cinematographer, who are the assistant cinematographers, down to that detail. I also defined how an artist's page would look like. This was an example of a cinematographer. What was their education, if we can find their socials, which would be very valuable for anyone early in their career to reach out. What are the awards they got, what movies they worked on. So this is a mini IMDb, but I wanted this to be present for every artist in the film, which was a very conceptual thought, but it's okay. We're just dealing with concepts here. And if you see design wise, my designs were kind of getting closer to what can actually be developed. And my Figma file also was better arranged. So all of these improvements were happening in the background through all the projects and the job I was doing. So this project pretty much stopped at a hypothesis level. I didn't discuss it with many people. I didn't show it to many people. It died a natural death over time. But why this project was important to me was because for the first time, I actually thought bigger than the world I knew. Tried to validate my hypothesis by actually designing something like this real quick. And it helped me get into the thought loop of, okay, what is really valuable in this product? What is the core value? So that's a question that kept running in my mind for most of the time. And the reason why it died a natural death is also because I couldn't find a solid value that I could convey to someone. And there was also no reason why a movie would put out so much resources and time into just sharing information that will not be of any monetary value. So these are some of the learnings that I had in retrospect with respect to this project. Moving to the second one. So this was my first freelance project in design with a company called Artmetrics. What they do is really interesting. I designed and developed their website. Development, I picked up Webflow for the first time. So this was an experimental project for me as well. And I did this for free. So Artmetrics was in this really interesting niche space of film tech. It was backed by Rana Daggubati and it dealt with data-driven filmmaking. After I got to know what they're doing, I reached out to them with an email proposing a project for a website and some product work as well. We couldn't get to do the product work, but within a month or two, we were able to go live with the website. So I'll just show you their website, which I have developed, and it is still luckily live in its own form. This was the first time I was using Webflow. Learning this was definitely a game changer. Webflow got me end-to-end products where I could design, develop, and help a company go live with their website rather than just working on one element of design of the entire journey a startup has to go through. So I'll talk about what Artmetrics does in filmmaking by going through this website and talking about their features. They have developed language models which can analyze scripts and plot them on an emotion curve. And if this seems very weird to you, every story that you've ever heard, be it a novel, be it a screenplay, be it a short film, be it a fucking email, it always has a structure, a well-written one. So the most famous structure, the 3-act structure, follows this kind of a plot with Act 1, Act 2 and Act 3, each meaning something, which is pretty much constant in any story that you take. There are more ways of defining these. There's something called the hero's journey, which is a little bit more detailed, and it goes through 8 phases of a hero's journey. And if you take this and put it on any film, for example, take some huge commercial hits like Avatar or Bahubali or Avengers, their stories pretty much fit this particular arc that we see in these structures. So Artmetrics was attempting to do something in the same lines, where the script goes through an algorithm and the algorithm plots an emotional graph. So why is something like this important for any film or production house? They can run their script through this algorithm, and from the emotional graph that is plotted, they can always go back and make changes in the scripts which can keep the which can keep the viewers hooked to the movie for as long as possible. They also have a casting analysis feature where the software can suggest actors based on the database that they have. And they also have competitive analysis and film positioning for when the film is about to be released, and provide insights on how the film has to be positioned. And moving on with the website, we had a testimonial from one of the most reputed production houses in the Telugu film industry. And then we spoke about the second product. So this tool helped the film's marketing teams to get a real-time understanding on how the promotions are going, and to a good degree get a prediction of how much the box office could collect in the opening days. Later we talked about the clients that they've worked with. If you have watched any Telugu movies, you would pretty much recognize all of these names. And then we talked about the team behind Artmetrics and a CTA to request a demo. So this was pretty much the entire landing page. Design wise, you can see it's pretty primitive, and that's what the requirement was also, because they didn't have a website and they just needed some basic landing page to put out their value props in a digestible format. And as I said, I worked on this project for free. I got to learn Webflow, and I also have a new website in my portfolio to show. For all the beginners out there in design, always aim for products which ship rather than concept projects. There's a Zameen Asman difference between both of them. Once you send someone a URL of your live website or product, they'll instantly get to know that, okay, you understand the cycle of taking a project live. What are the roadblocks you encounter last minute? What are the different kind of assets that you'll have to create? All of this cannot be taught through any tutorials. One has to actually go through the cycle of learning, and it is extremely valuable. With that, let's move into the next part, how I designed and developed my portfolio website. So this was one of the earliest versions I had, where I introduced myself in the first section, wanted to have my picture for a personal touch that there's a person behind this website. Straight away jumped into design and talked about my projects both on the job and on the side. And this design evolved and evolved and evolved, and it got to a final state where I could categorize all the things that I could work on in different sections. Like the first section talked about design, second section talked about creative coding, freelancing, my YouTube journey, and some of my inspirations. I really wanted to have this section because why not? And I also wanted to have my Spotify playlists, but that didn't go into the website live, and a final footer. And I'll show you how the website looks like after being developed. So this is the final thing. Some of the links don't work right now, but it's a single landing page, kept it simple. And this was the website I was getting ready with to apply for new jobs. So as you can see, there are some more improvements I've did after getting into my second job, but nothing design related. I've just added some more products into the design portfolio that I had. So this was my freelance journey. my YouTube videos, added some numbers and hyperlinked them to my YouTube channel. Talked about my creative coding, was really proud of this small animation that I had. Learning animations in Webflow was a huge deal back then, and it felt really good being able to animate all of this by myself. And again, inspirations were here, and I just had a form for anyone to just leave their thoughts. I think I had a 20 entry limit for the form, after which I had to pay. I never paid. If anyone had submitted anything after that, I just don't know. And that was it. I kept it simple. Even though it was a simple landing page, it took so much time to get to the structure, define each of these components, how they would look like, how these chips would look like. Overall, I was really happy with how the website was looking and what it was conveying. There were so many things to fix. For example, this just one white line that's been really bugging me for 3 years. Yeah, I just let it be. I didn't want to worry about it too much, and it served its purpose. This was my portfolio for about 2 to 3 years, and it worked really well in landing me freelance clients and full-time opportunities. And this was my first website live on the internet. It was like a home on the internet, and it felt really, really special. Only 6 months back, after all the 2 years freelancing that I did, I decided to update my portfolio, include all the new projects, get a fresh design, and it is live now at prempradeep.com. This website is a little bit more complex than that, where it's just not a single page. I had individual pages for each of the things that I wanted to showcase my skills in, and we'll get to all of this in the later videos. But now, let's go back to 2020 again. So by the time I had this website ready, this fucking dog. So by the time I had this website ready, COVID just hit. So I had a full portfolio with decent enough products that went live, some side projects, some other side experiments that I did, and the world wasn't ready to hire at that point. Everyone went into survival mode. I went into survival mode. I was still in Coimbatore, and I was just waiting for one chance to get out of that city and come to Bangalore. So by this time, I actually decided I was gonna stay in Coimbatore for much, much longer because companies weren't hiring. And I was thinking of another project that I could take up, which will actually put me in a much better place when companies start hiring again. So I was in that grind again, trying to write down problem statements that I could focus on, come up with solutions, come up with designs, develop it. All of that was going through my mind when suddenly Openhouse happened. While a lot of companies took a massive hit because of COVID, some companies and industries actually boomed during that time. The biggest example that we know of is Zoom. Similarly, education, such a fundamental thing in every person's life, a calendar event in every person's life, got disrupted, and a lot of companies entered the field trying to solve the problem of education during COVID. And Openhouse was one such company. Openhouse was already a successful business before COVID with their physical centers in Kolkata. They were tapping into the network of local tuition teachers and giving them good spaces where they could conduct classes, and giving the students a non-judgmental space outside their school where they can explore other activities other than academics. And once COVID hit, Openhouse was forced to shift from their physical centers model to an online education platform. And that's when they needed to onboard product designers. So I got to know about this opportunity at Openhouse through a mutual friend. And as far as I remember, I had 4 rounds of interviews. The first round of interview was with the founder of Openhouse, where I walked him through my Uber Eats case study. The second round was with the engineering lead, where we actually did a whiteboarding exercise which lasted for about 1.5 hours. The problem statement was generic: to build an app for bachelors to find new roommates and for hosts to find new residents. The objective of most whiteboarding exercises is not the final output, but how a person is engaging in the conversation and trying to make sense of the problem statement, and the overall approach takes a higher priority here. So the whiteboarding exercise went occasionally well. The third round was a take-home assignment where I had to redesign their website and create a new illustration defining the theme of Openhouse, where kids can come, play together and learn. So this is a 2-part problem. I'll jump into the redesign which I presented to them. Obviously, after a lot of iterations on Figma, this is the eventual deck I presented to them, and let's skim through it quickly. I reiterated the problem statement again, which was to redesign the current website to enhance user experience, pretty generic, and to optimize for conversions. This was one thing I focused on during the redesign. And the second one was about the illustration. And by this time, I learned my lessons in presenting my stuff. So at the onset, I gave anyone who's going through this deck a flow of how the presentation is going to be, which is I did an analysis of the current website. I set some objectives with which I'll be redesigning. I talked about my research, and I showed my redesigns on web and mobile, and then comes the illustration part. So going to the analysis of their website, I took screenshots of each page, here the home page, and noted down what worked in green and what didn't work out in red. And I did that for every single page. The instructor page was pretty important. This is where the parents who would be taking the decisions for their children and paying their fees, this is where the trust will actually be garnered. And then I talked about my research. All these companies that I researched were in the education space, and Airbnb is an outlier in this set. I basically benchmarked Airbnb on how they're generating trust. Then I set the objectives for my redesign. This is really important. You can see how this didn't exist in the Uber Eats case study, where I picked some screenshots from the Uber Eats app and I said, okay, this could improve. But why? That why was missing. So this time I made sure I rectified that mistake and set my objectives right away. And my redesign was gonna revolve around these three terms. So then I presented my redesigned pages where I showed what features I added to improve scannability and urgency. I went to do that for every single page. Trust is another thing. And of course, there were other UX improvements which I put them in another category. I made sure I highlighted all the key elements of my redesign and then categorized them in all the objectives that I set initially. And just to give you an example of how I solved things using these keywords, instead of just showing what workshops were going to happen this week or this month, we can also additionally show the number of seats remaining, which would help the person actually take the decision faster, understanding the urgency. And in the end, I also added some testimonials and some numbers which were actually missing from the website, which can garner trust. And then I focused more on their instructor page and added a lot more consumable elements which would garner trust, like the number of classes they've taken so far, testimonials from their students, and some things about their personal life as well. And then I showed how these designs would look on mobile. And by the way, in retrospect, I would change one thing. If you see in the mobile here how the numbers are displayed, whereas in web, it was displayed in different tiles. A developer would ideally have to build two different elements for mobile and web, which is not really ideal. So that's one thing I would change if I were doing it again now. So that was entirely about the website. Now coming to the illustration part, by this time I had already done 100 illustrations during my 100 days of illustration challenge. So I approached this problem statement with decent confidence, but it turned out to be really funny. This was the illustration I could come up with after breaking my head for days. Like, this was what I did when I didn't have any objective, and this was for a job interview. This when I didn't need it, and this when the stakes were really, really high. At the end of this presentation, I told them, guys, it was a mistake that I told I know illustrations. I do not know how to do them. I'm gonna take it back. Please judge me on my UX design skills only. So this round went really well, actually. The team could see immediate value that I could offer to the existing product suite. After this, I had another round of interview with a front-end engineer, and within a day or two, they offered me the role. The very same day I put my papers, and in a month, once the travel ban was lifted, me and my roommate ran to Bangalore without any plan of where we were going to stay. So coming to the final segment of this video, I'll discuss what products I worked on at Openhouse. This was a very interesting time for me because all the FOMO I felt while I was in Coimbatore about what's happening in Bangalore startups, what's that hustle culture like, I got to see all of that and more here. Now jumping into the products I've worked there were primarily 4 of them. The Openhouse website was one major part that I worked on during my time there. OH Meets was our in-house video conferencing platform. It was an alternative to G Meets or Zoom. We wanted to add more and more features that were beneficial for learning, which Google Meets and Zoom couldn't offer. We have our OH lobby. I'll talk about it more. And we also built a product for group study. This was an open source product that we built not just for Openhouse students, but for anyone to come online together during COVID, solve questions together, share notes, and a lot more features that are included in here. I'll get to the details of it, but let's go one by one. So to talk about my work at Openhouse, I had actually made this presentation and I used them in my interviews at Aether. So I'm going to show you the same thing. And you can see by this time, the kind of presentation has evolved in form. It was not a deck or a Medium article anymore. I wanted to take full control of how I wanted to present my information. So I had my overview, I had the problems distilled, and I had all my solutions with relevant screenshots and eventually some learnings. So this is pretty much a case study on my work at Openhouse. So let's dig in. So at the onset, I've set some context about what Openhouse was trying to solve and what kind of a world it was in, basically COVID. What were the core pain points that we were experiencing in online education during COVID? And what are the problems that are distilled to? So I'll spend some time on this. So in an online world, these are some of the problems a student would face when compared to their offline experience. The the problem of identity, the problem of being able to express, just raising an eyebrow in a class, raising a hand in a class, all of these are missing in an online world. In school, whatever peer to peer interactions that we have for fun, and the entire social experience of being in a learning environment, which was basically designed and built for learning. And another part was learning together without any teachers or instructors, where friends come together and have a group study session. So these are some of the main problems that we tried to address. And this is one constraint that Openhouse had. We ensured the class strength was a maximum of 15 students so that every student will get personal attention from the instructors. And this was partly the team which worked on all the projects that I'm going to show now. Now that we have our problems distilled, I'll show you how we tried solving each of them. The first part was solving for identity. With the students' videos mostly off, there was a huge problem of identity. So the way we tried to solve that was to give the student the ability to design their own custom avatar so that even when their videos are off, a part of their identity is still intact. So this was one of the features that got really good traction where people created avatars instantly without us even nudging them. We had about 700 plus students on the platform, by the way. And coming to the next one, solving for expression. Now with the videos off, we had a problem of the instructor never being able to get a temperature of the room. Are the folks interested? Are they excited? Are they feeling bored? So we wanted to solve this problem by actually giving the students some options to express. When they have a doubt, they can raise their hand. When they're stuck doing some problems or assignments, they could show that as well. They could show with a thumbs up or a thumbs down whether they understood the concept or not. So this is where the avatars also helped, where we could form a cohesive experience between a person's identity and expression. We also solved for peer-to-peer interactions. What does this mean? These are the smallest things that happen in a class that go unnoticed, but these are the biggest ones that we'll miss in an online world. To give you an example that we developed on these lines, the smallest gesture of an eyebrow raise when a person enters the class, that eye contact, that hey, you've entered, I acknowledge you. So we tried to replicate that in the product, and the feature that we came up was a fun one. Whenever someone entered the OH Meets platform, everyone else can throw tomatoes at them and they would see a splash that would appear for 5 or 10 seconds and then disappear. This was one of the features that was most used in the entire OH suite. And we had other experiments also in this direction of peer-to-peer interactions. And coming to solving for the social experience of actually having a learning environment around you, we have developed something called the lobby. This was a very, very tough project engineering-wise. Basically, what we tried to do was replicate a school environment where you'll be seeing notice boards, you'll be seeing people around, you can peep and look into a class before even going inside. So whatever elements we thought were interesting in a school setting or in a tuition setting, we tried to replicate them and productize them. We call this the Openhouse lobby. I'll show it in a prototype how it actually works. So this entire lobby is a horizontal scroll. You land on the screen before joining the class. You have your schedule here. You can join the classes from here. Or you could explore what else is in the lobby. So whatever Openhouse events that we had which could be beneficial to the students, they could see it before even they could enter the classes. We plan to hyperlink some learning resources here, but this section got deprioritized later. And this was where you actually entered the class. So this was an interesting interaction we spent a lot of time on. As the student is moving closer to the door opens and we also see who else is there in the class. So I had to define all the edge cases of how this preview would look with different number of students in the class with or without the teacher. And as the person moves past the door closes again with all of these previews disappearing. We had some content suggestions as well. This again is a conceptual piece. And we had some game rooms as well, which we had for a while, where students can play some games together. We had them embedded in our platform as well, and that's the end of the lobby. We had a navigation also at the bottom where people could jump to specific parts of the lobby, and these are all the different elements that we wanted to show in the lobby as a whole. As you can imagine, this project took a lot of time to go live. I had to define the smallest things like how these bricks would behave, because development does not happen like a scroll, it happens in sections. So how this random arrangement of bricks ends and starts without breaking the flow, how these hanging plants should be arranged, and how the responsiveness of this entire thing is present across devices. So all of these things were major challenges for us. And if you see this particular screen, most of the things were hard-coded, but some of the things like who's the instructor, what's the class going on, how much time before the class starts, all of these are coming from APIs. These cannot be hard coded. So we had to make sure the design accommodated all kinds of text and digits that were coming from the APIs, and also define all the edge cases where we weren't getting data from the APIs. And going live with this project was a really, really great learning experience for me, because this was quite ambitious in terms of what we wanted to achieve, and we actually pulled it off at the end of it. Even though we have to admit that the adoption of this was quite low, not as much as we have expected, but this was a solid experiment that we had run while at Openhouse. Now, moving to the group learning aspect, for the research, I sat in a lot of Discord servers where people from random countries are coming together, united by a topic like calculus or areas and volumes, and they're just silently sitting together explaining doubts to each other. So we tried to observe what was already existing on these Discord servers or any other learning platforms, and we tried to build on top of it. So we built this product called Openhouse Group Study. This was again one of the products I could work on from the beginning to shipping. So the key features of this group study product that we wanted to work on were: you should be able to share notes, solve questions together with a time limit, and whiteboard and screen share. This is pretty basic. So solving questions together with a time limit was the toughest nut to crack in this overall product, and gamification was involved in that too. So this is simply how the product worked. You can start a group study session and share the link with your friends. Once everyone enters the session, students can select the question banks that they want to solve from a library of 100 plus question bank resources that we had put together from our open house teachers and some external sources as well. So once they select a particular question bank based on the filters, they can start solving them together. And here we design an open house app as well, where the students could take a picture and upload their response immediately so that the other people could see as well. And we introduced a lot of gamification elements, which I won't go into the details. Basically, the objective of this whole thing was to make studying together fun and more seamless. And obviously, we had to solve for edge cases like poor connectivity, students dropping off, what happens when they join in, what stage do they join in. So we had to define all these logics. So this was less UI and a lot of defining the product that was involved here. So that was the overall bunch of projects I took up at Openhouse. Apart from this, I also was focused on the website as well. Their current website is completely revamped from what I had worked on, so I can't exactly show that. But overall, I got to work with really fresh visuals, interesting problem statements. I could actually this time talk to the users, basically students I was developing these products for. So that loop was constantly there. We were also interacting with the teachers from time to time to understand their problems better and come up with solutions for teachers as well. There were other products which we developed for teachers which I didn't put in this presentation. But this is the advantage of a startup, where you'll be a part of a lot of experiments. Some of them fail, some of them really catch on, and you double down on what works more. So that was pretty much it for this video. In the next video, I'm going to talk about a really interesting phase in my life where I quit my job and relied entirely on freelancing income. So the dynamics completely changed there, and I'm going to get into the details. So thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.
Who gives